So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on fly-ins and on creating a seamless fly-in day. We're coming up to prime fly-in season here in Washington, D.C., so we thought this was kind of a timely topic, and it would seem, judging by the number of you joining us today, that you think so too. So I'm Anne Dermody. I'm the Content Marketing Managing Editor here at CQ Roll Call for Advocacy and Government Relations, and I'm delighted to be joined today by two people who know advocacy and politics and all things Washington very well. So our first speaker is Mike Gula, and Mike is a co-founder of Prime Advocacy and Gula Graham. And Prime Advocacy is a leading Washington, D.C. fly-in consulting firm that specializes in scheduling congressional appointments, event management, and trip logistics for associations and corporations. And they've scheduled over 16,000 meetings since 2010 and 3,800 last year alone. So kind of an understatement to say that Mike knows pretty much everything there is about fly-in days. And Mike will kind of talk a bit about why you should schedule or consider a fly-in day, the first steps to take if you do decide to do one, and sort of the pitfalls to avoid. And then later on, we're going to be joined by Megan McCoskey. Megan is our advocacy product manager here at CQ Roll Call, and she has worked and does work closely with nonprofits, trade associations, and our corporate clients to kind of help them leverage tools to make the most of their advocacy platforms. And Megan's going to talk a little bit about how and why you could use technology to sort of help you create a better fly-in and to make your life a little bit easier. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mike. Off you go, Mike.
Well, thanks, Anne. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about why groups should be coming to Washington, D.C. and holding a fly-in. I think the best question is, why shouldn't you come to Washington to meet with members of Congress and staff? Because there really is no reason why you should not come to Washington. You should always come to Washington every single year. This is the best place to build relationships for you and your organization to meet with members of Congress and meet with staff. Members and staff want to meet with you. Members and staff need to meet with you. That is why it is incredibly important that you take the time to come to Washington, D.C. and lobby members and staff. There is a huge benefit on the constituent level from everybody in your organization to come to Washington, D.C. As I mentioned earlier, the staffers on the Hill and the members of Congress on the Hill, they want to meet with their local constituents. They don't have enough time when they go back home in the district to be meeting with everybody. So where's the best place to do it? Washington, D.C. It is extremely important that you encourage your members to participate. It's extremely important for your organization to be participating because everybody's coming to Washington. And how do you stand out outside all the white noise? It is to walk the halls of Congress and meet with members and meet with staff. The first step is, how far out should you plan this? Well, obviously, depending on your group size, will have a big impact of when you should start. Generally, we like to believe that you should be starting at least 6 months to a year out. Anything more than a year gets very difficult given the congressional calendar. So starting anywhere between 6 months and a year, the sweet spot's about 9 months. We highly recommend doing registration about 4 to 5 months out, depending on when your fly-in is. If your fly-in's about a year away, we recommend doing it about 5 months. If your fly-in's 6 months to 9 months away, we recommend doing it about 3 months. It's extremely important to get this on people's radar screen pretty much as early as possible. So once you have your date picked out, the next thing you need to do is create a timeline. Creating a timeline is going to set parameters and set goals for everybody in your organization to meet, and your participants that you want to have come to Washington know what the expectation is of getting back to you. So once you create this timeline, it's extremely important you stick with it. Who to hold the meetings with? Obviously, the most important person to be meeting with is the member of Congress. That's what everybody wants. That's what everybody thinks. But we believe it is just as important to be meeting with high-level staff, because the high-level staff are the ones that are briefing the member, that are writing the legislation, that are doing the majority of the meetings. Sometimes by the time the issue gets to the member of Congress, the decision's already been made. So if you're just meeting with just the member and not meeting with the staff, you're honestly doing yourself a disservice. Obviously, meeting with the member of Congress is extremely important, but meeting with staff is almost as equally as important. The way members of Congress offices generally work, in order to get a member-level meeting, it has 3 levels, we believe. 1 being a constituent. 2 being a business constituent in the district, because obviously some people don't live in the district but work in the district, and the business has a lot of employees. And 3rd is a issue based on the committee of jurisdiction that the member is on. So of those 3 things, that's generally the criteria that you need to be looking at when getting and requesting meetings. 1, direct constituent. 2, business constituent. And 3, issue of the jurisdiction that the member of Congress sits on. So when you want to start, and what you want to really avoid, is going away from your plan. You really need to stick to your plan. That is extremely important. So once you have your fly-in picked out, once you have the date and you know when it's going to be, the first thing you need to do, of anything over 30 people or 30 rooms that you need to lock in your hotel room block. That is extremely important. So if you know your fly-in's a year away, get your room block 1 year away. The next day, it's very similar to a wedding. You get engaged, you have your wedding date, you want to get the reception spot immediately, just like room blocks in Washington, D.C. If you wait too long, there's a chance you could get stuck out in Virginia, which is fine. It's just a little bit longer of a drive. The other things you want to start worrying about, bus transportation. Are they going to be using the metro, or are they going to be doing a car service? If you're going to be doing bus transportation, we highly recommend locking down a bus at least 3 to 4 months in advance, because they do get filled up, especially in the springtime. If you're going to be doing a fly-in during the springtime, we definitely recommend at least 6 months in advance getting bus services, depending on the number of buses you do need. Also, event space. Event space over 100 people, you're very limited to the spaces around Capitol Hill that you're going to be able to do receptions, breakfast, lunches, if you don't want to use your hotel, if your hotel is not on Capitol Hill. You obviously can use the rooms in the House and Senate office buildings, but those do get booked 3 to 4 months out from the day of your fly-in. House and Senate offices will only book rooms 3 to 4 months out, depending on which side you want your room on. Getting back to sticking to your plan, when you have your date and you have your timeline, you need to stick to the registration opening and the registration closing. Your participants need to know when registration closes. And why is that important? Because once registration closes, that's when you're going to start making your meeting requests. If you wait too long towards your fly-in, you might not get the best quality meetings that you're really looking for. So once you have your date, set a schedule of when you want to send out your registration form, and then when your registration deadline will end. Other things. When you make your meeting requests, you need to respect the offices and their time. We have seen over the last 2 or 3 years, offices really dislike associations and corporations when they come to town who bait and switch attendees. So when you make your meeting request, and say you make a meeting request for Congressman X, and you give them the 3 names and the date you would like to have the meeting with, and then the day before when you confirm the meeting, and they're 3 totally different names, the offices really get upset. Honestly, I don't know why, but they do. So if you can make sure one person is consistent throughout the process, that you know will be in that meeting, that's all that matters. The offices are fine with that, as long as one participant that you said is going to be in the meeting when you make the meeting request, and then when you confirm it's the same person, that's all that matters. Secondly, if an attendee cancels the week before, the week of, the day of, please reach out to the offices to let them know. No-shows leave a horrible impression with Member of Congress's office. It's a reflection not just on the person, but on your organization as well. You need to be prompt in responding to emails from schedulers. As you can imagine, they get a lot of requests on a daily basis. So if a Member of Congress's office reaches out and responds to your meeting request saying that the Member of Congress is able to meet at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, and they email you in the morning, and you wait 2 or 3 days to get back to them, the chances of you being able to get that meeting are basically zero. We recommend getting back to the scheduler in less than 1 day. By the close of business, you should have responded to that meeting request. We believe doing it 1 to 2 hours is the best practice. You have to be responsive, because if they offer you the time, they might take it back later in the afternoon if somebody gets back to them sooner. So if a scheduler emails, jump on that time and be respectful and be responsive. And if the time doesn't work, let them know, and they will work with you on the time as long as you're getting back to them in a timely manner. Offices really remember bad experiences with schedules. And if you want to meet with them again, they're going to remember that, you bait and switched them on names, or the response time was really slow, or you didn't give them the appropriate information on the first or second meeting request. The whole point of coming to Washington is to build relationships. So what's the first way to make a great impression on a relationship is having everything in order when you're making the meeting request and dealing with the scheduler. You're much more likely to get a meeting the second, third, and fourth year if the first time or second time you're talking to them, it's a great experience.
Mike, just to ask you a quick question there on
Sure.
your last slide. Is there a kind of golden number in terms of how many people you should be sort of packing into a congressional office, or how many people you should arrange a meeting,
That's a great question. On the House and Senate sides differ completely. I know a lot of people have seen the show West Wing, and Capitol Hill is idolized, and it's like make-believe in the movies. Congressional offices are very small. You're talking about less than 700 square feet, and you're cramming almost 10 staffers in that space. So we recommend having no more than 4 of your attendees per meeting on the House side. On the Senate side, they have conference rooms. The offices are much larger because they're representing the entire state. We recommend having no more than 12 people. 12 is even pushing it, but no more than 12. The sweet spot on the Senate side is around 6 to 7 people.
Okay, great. And just in a fly-in overall, is there a particular number where you should cap it, or is there a particular number where you would advise someone to maybe hand it over to the professionals?
We have learned that anybody can get meetings on Capitol Hill. You can do this in-house. Absolutely. You can hire a temp to do this in-house. We believe at Prime Advocacy that it's best to let a professional do this, only because we have learned this is a science to get meetings. We have learned that there are certain offices that want phone calls. There are certain offices that want faxes. There are certain offices that don't want a meeting request 2 weeks in advance. One wants them 6 weeks in advance. And unless you know the methodology of Capitol Hill and which offices want particular ways they get meetings, it's very difficult to get the highest number of meetings possible. Mm-hmm. With so many moving parts, there are associations that have their state association reach out to that particular state. But then it's going to conflict sometimes with what the national guys want to do. If somebody's going to be meeting from the state of Texas, and then they want to push them in an Arkansas meeting because they might know the Arkansas representative, and then times get very overlapped, which is why we believe having one point of contact to be meeting with all the offices, meeting with all the states, is the best case scenario, because it reduces the amount of confusion, because it is complete organized chaos. And the other thing it allows it to do is looking at your board of making sure your participants are not having to go from the House side to the Senate side, back to the House side, back to the Senate side. You should really try to look at your board as a chessboard, not a checkers board. If you have a meeting at 10 o'clock on the House side, you should not be scheduling a meeting on the Senate side at 11 o'clock. You're really going to be rushing your participants, and the whole point is for them to have a great experience. So what we recommend doing is doing one side of the House in the morning, the other side in the afternoon. Obviously, if it's a member-level meeting, sometimes that just can't happen. But if you have one person in control of this, it helps the flow of the day for everybody's schedule.
Makes sense.
So let's talk briefly about an example of a very successful fly-in. the difference between a successful fly-in and an unsuccessful fly-in. A successful fly-in we have worked with is pharma. They actually had their very first fly-in this past year. Without a doubt, it was the smoothest first fly-in or any fly-in we've ever dealt with. And why? Because of the communication between the pharma people and our company. Pharma held full team meetings in person and over the phone with our group once a week or once every other week. Everybody was looped in. The people weren't left off emails. In the age of emails, it's okay if you get 100 emails. Just hit the delete button. But everybody needs to be clued in, and that's what they made sure of. Everybody on their team knew exactly what was going on. We set deadlines. They met the deadlines. They let everybody in their group know this is your responsibility, this is your responsibility, this is your responsibility. So everybody had not just responsibility but accountability. So when you're bringing in a minimum of over 100 people, there's going to be a lot of moving parts. So people need to be assigned specific roles, and that's what Pharma did very well. People had roles. Everybody was on the same email chain. Everybody showed up for the meetings, and the meetings sometimes lasted 10 minutes, but everybody knew what was going on, and we checked the boxes, and then we moved on. That's the way to have a very successful fly-in. How to have an unsuccessful fly-in? Because at the end of the day, fly-ins generally, no matter even how successful, they're going to be crazy. Your hair's going to be on fire. People are going to be stressed. It's going to be emotional. But the way you limit that is by communication, deadlines, and organization. What we have seen for an unsuccessful fly-in is groups not paying attention to the details. You would have an outside company like us, Prime Advocacy, scheduling the meetings. And then a group will wait until 2 to 3 days before the fly-in and then want to change 50 times on the schedule. Obviously, we can do that, but it's not going to maximize the number of meetings you want or the opportunity to meet with the best people in the office. So we recommend, obviously there will be changes to the schedule, but limiting the amount of changes to the schedule. Looking at everybody's schedule 2 to 3 weeks in advance. Detail.
I'm curious. Sorry, Mike. I'm curious about, when you said Pharma did it very well because they had a sort of centralized team within their own organization. Do you find that that's not necessarily that maybe the GR person isn't necessarily the best person? I mean, is that sometimes a marketing person or a communications person, or do you recommend bringing those people in?
It is. And the problem that we see sometimes is that groups have event planners at their company or their association, or they have a meetings department, which is fine when they want to get meetings for their executives or state-level people all around different areas around the country. As it relates to Washington, D.C., if they have a GR team, it's best for an outside group or the GR team to be working with the Washington, D.C.-based GR team, because the D.C. team knows how Capitol Hill works, and they know the expectation of what it takes to get a meeting. And occasionally when we're working with groups, they want their meetings department based in various cities throughout the country who don't understand the responsiveness that has to happen to get the meetings. It does take time. It does take work. And a lot of the times where there is some confusion is when, like I was speaking earlier about, state associations take control of certain state meetings, and then they don't clue in the national GR team based in Washington, D.C., so people are flying blind. Or, for example, we've handled a big fly-in, all 50 states, and some states schedule meetings while we were scheduling meetings. We didn't know they were scheduling meetings because the state didn't tell the national people they wanted to schedule their own meetings. So then we were making meeting requests, they were making meeting requests. So as long as they're one point of contact at the organization that's based in Washington or knows Washington, that is the best way to have a successful fly-in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
The most important thing to really do realize is offices want to be accommodating. So what we highly recommend as to make a successful fly-in, when you make the initial meeting request, give them as much information as possible. The last thing you want to be doing is sending multiple emails to a scheduler with additional information. That will annoy them, that will go to their spam folder. It is extremely important to send one email that has all the information. And by all the information, I mean obviously introducing your organization, putting in who you would like to be in the meeting, who you would like to be meeting with, because sometimes we don't make meeting requests to meet with members. Sometimes we make it to meet with the chief or the LD or the legislative aide. Then you obviously want to always put in one or two issues you would like to be speaking about when you meet with a member of Congress or the staffer. And most importantly, the day of contact number. They always want to know who the day of contact number is. So just to go over that again, in order to have a successful fly-in of what you want to be making in your meeting request, who your group is, the date and time frame, which I didn't mention earlier. Put the date and time frame always at the top. Group's meeting on March 25th. We have availability from 8:30 to 2:30. Does the member have 10 to 15 minutes? Always say 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to get longer than 10 to 15 minutes, but if you go in and asking for a 30-minute meeting, you're going to get rejected. Rarely do people confirm 30-minute meetings because they know meetings always run longer. So always ask for 10 to 15 minutes, and you will get longer than 10 to 15 minutes. It just is more practical and easier to schedule if you just are realistic. So, again, your organization, your time frame of the day that you're going to be on the Hill, who's going to be in the meeting, and 1 to 2 issues that you would like to discuss, and the day of contact number is the most important thing that you need to be adding to any meeting request. So the key takeaways. What you really need to remember is this is about relationships. And the people that are coming to Washington, D.C. from your organization, they're taking time away from their families. They're taking time away from their job. They're taking time away from their children's activities at home, possibly. So this needs to be a special opportunity. This needs to be their Mr. Smith goes to Washington moment, especially if you want to have them come back, because good advocacy is about coming back over and over and over again to offices. Because once you start that relationship, you want to keep that relationship. And how do you keep that relationship? It's by keep coming back to Washington, D.C. Because obviously the GR team in D.C. can't meet with every office that you're going to be meeting with in one day. It might take them a year to do that. So you really have a great opportunity in 1 day or 2 days to be touching as many offices as possible to help your organization. Lastly, with the offices, like I said at the very beginning, they need you to come to Washington, D.C. They want you to come to Washington, D.C. I know it might seem like a daunting task to schedule the meetings, to do room blocks, to schedule flights, to get people here, to come up with a program, but it is worth it. Your participants in your organization, after coming once, will want to keep coming back, and it will only help your footprint on Capitol Hill. And that's why there are groups that handle specific fly-ins in Washington, D.C. that know how to get the job done and can help you along the way. You don't have to turn the entire fly-in over to a company. You might just want to turn over the transportation, or you might just want to turn in just the meetings. So don't think that you have to turn over all control. You might want to take it step by step. But Washington, D.C. is a great place to bring your organization, because at the end of the day, the members want to meet with you and the staff want to meet with you. So why not come and build relationships?
Great. I love the idea, Mike, that you point out that this is kind of a Mr. Smith goes to Washington experience for a lot of attendees, because presumably some people will never even have been to D.C., right? But how do you handle their expectations? You know, I've heard that sometimes people are very disappointed when they don't meet their member of Congress. Maybe they met a staffer, and maybe it was a high-level staffer, but they didn't realize it because they looked young, or how do you kind of control those sort of expectations?
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially for groups that, A, have never come to Washington, or B, they have people that have never been to Washington, that they really have a crash course of what it's going to be like. Because it does shock people, because people see shows on television and they think this is the way it is. D.C. is honestly like Hollywood. It's all make-believe on television. D.C. is run by a bunch of late 20 and middle 30-year-olds in reality. D.C. is run by those people. And if you don't get to know the 27-year-olds and 29-year-olds, now when they're 27, 29, they're going to be really important when they're 36, 37. So you want to build those relationships when the children essentially are younger, because it's going to shock people that the 27-year-olds or the 36 or the 32-year-old is the one writing the legislation. They are the most important people in the office. And so if you want to build a relationship, you have to start when the people are the legislative aides or the legislative directors. And if you're rude to those people, you don't think they are important, then the relationship is just going to die right there, because next year when you want to meet with them, when they're actually even more important in the office, they might not want to meet with you. So don't be insulted or depressed that you might be meeting with a 30-year-old. DC is run by 30-year-olds. And it's hard for people to grasp that until they see it.
Wondering, too, is there an argument for, trying to get kind of, I don't know, cutesy or provocative to sort of get bigger attention beyond your Hill Day, or do you want to kind of stay away from that?
No, I think it's very important that you mix in a communication angle to Hill Days. And that is, honestly, I've been doing fly-ins for the last 7 years, and that's the one missing aspect that I see. Not enough groups do any kind of communication build-up to coming to Washington, and then after they leave, they don't do anything afterwards. So they come here for one day, they hit the halls, they have a great, impactful fly-in day, and then they're gone. You don't read it in the papers. You don't see it in the DC kind of rag clips. You don't even know they're on Washington. They're even in Washington until the day they're in Washington. So I think there is an opportunity where groups should have some kind of communication build-up up to the day of their fly-in, and then 1 or 2 days afterwards. I think that's very important.
And presumably there's scope, within the media, within the states that the groups are coming from too, right? Because it's maybe bigger news there than it would be in D.C.
Absolutely, and I think there is a big opportunity that I don't see that very often, that groups need to use members of Congress as their lobbyists. So if you're coming into Washington, D.C., and you're talking about jobs in their district or employees in their district, give them information that they could tweet out, put on their Facebook page, put on their social media handle, because members need content. There's 535 up here. They want to stand out. They want to let their district know what they're doing, who they're meeting with. So if you go into a Hill Day with kind of 1 or 2 tidbits that you can give to the communication person and say, just want to let you know that we have 500 doctors in your district that do X, or there's 1,000 cancer patients that attend this hospital that's in your district. They want to tweet that stuff out, and then they tweet out something great about, I just met with X person from X clinic, helping them do X, Y, Z. They're looking for content. So don't be afraid to make them your lobbyists, because they're looking to show people what they're doing here in town.
Makes total sense, particularly given that, like we're saying, the Hill is run by 25-year-olds, so they'll be very open to any sort of social media snippets, I would imagine, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Listen, Mike, great information, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Let me know if I can ever help.
Okay, great. So now we're going to go over to Megan McCoskey, as promised. Megan is our Advocacy Product Manager here, and she's going to talk a little bit about how technology, and specifically an event app or an advocacy event app, can help you for your fly-in day. And in the interest of full disclosure, we do here at CQ Roll Call have a very good Advocacy Engage app, but obviously this information sort of applies to all apps and kind of what you should look for if you're thinking about going down that line. So maybe, Megan, we could start off with you kind of telling us a little bit about why an app could make your life a lot easier.
Sure. So something that you will want to look for with your Flyin app will be extending the things that we've been doing for Fly-ins for as long as they've existed. And putting together dossiers for your attendees, typically hard copies that include things like talking points, schedules, bios for the people that they'll be meeting with, as well as feedback forms so you can get feedback from them on how the meetings went with these elected officials. With the Advocacy app, we want to take all of those things and put them in a digital form so that people have them at their fingertips, make them less static, something that you can change on the fly as needed, because as we all know, things change once you get on the ground, to keep everyone on schedule, make sure that they have easy access to those talking points, bios, information about where they need to be and when, and also allow them to network and really maximize the contacts that they'll make here at that fly-in. There are also some fun things that we'll talk about on ways that you can use the application to generate revenue and really make sure that you give people all the right information that they'll need and be able to update it as needed to help your event go really smoothly and make sure you look very professional while you're doing so. So the first thing you'll want to think about is ways that you can maximize the experience for people. And so on the left here, we're looking at a dashboard of an application. And at the very top, we've got a promoted post. And you can think about that as like a pinned tweet on your Twitter feed. So that will be a place where you can welcome everyone, maybe give a welcome message from your CEO or your executive director, talking about the importance of the fly-in day. Also make sure people know who their next meeting is with, show them their upcoming schedule, any messages that they're exchanging with other attendees, networking they're doing. We also have a fun feature that lets you turn on social media posts. And so if there's any tweets using a hashtag you've chosen for your event, we'll pull it in, get it in that dashboard, and it's a nice way to keep the info up to date and really provide people with a lot of content. We also do a little bit of gamification with the sessions, and so you can have comments and messages surrounding meetings and sessions, so you can see what the most popular ones were and really continue the conversation after just that scheduled meeting time. Something that's very important as you look at an application is using notifications, and so you can use push notifications in a few ways. We're all familiar with something popping up on your phone with news from the Washington Post. Same thing applies here, but it's information about your event. And so you can do them in a scheduled fashion. And so let's say I have a bus that's leaving at 7:45, and I'll want to send out a push notification that will go out at 7:30 saying, bus is leaving in 15 minutes, you better be on it. And I can set that up months in advance, so I don't need to worry about it day of. We talked a little bit about how things can change once things are getting moving on the ground. And so the other type of notification you can send out is on the fly. So you log into your back end, you plug in some text about the changes that have been made, and you send out a push notification to all your attendees so that everyone's in the loop and we don't need to wait for people to do things like check their emails to get that information. And then finally, the last type of notification is just kind of fun. So beacon technology has gotten really accessible. And so you can get a little beacon that's location-based for about 15 bucks. They're like the size of a sticker. And so if we go back to the bus example, if I do a beacon-based notification, I can get a beacon, program a notification for that beacon, and put it on the bus. And then if I get on that bus, I will receive the beacon notification because I'm in the range of it, and I can send, say, information about that they should look at on the ride over, talking points, things they need to know to get ready for their day. And it just adds a little bit of magic to the app. So things to look for when you're looking for an app. The first thing is, we all know not everyone has an iPhone, so we'll want to look for something that works across multiple devices. We're looking for iOS. We're looking for Android. And we also want to make sure that we're not leaving out people who have a BlackBerry or a Windows phone, or even who want to access this right from their laptop. So look for something that is available across all device types. And if possible, optimized for tablets as well as phones, so you can give people the best experience for each of those screen resolutions. You'll also want to make sure that you have a tool that's customizable. And so your fly-in is going to be different from somebody else's fly-in and vice versa. Different things are important to you. So you'll want something that you can customize iconography, organization, page titles, as well as information types. So an example would be I'll want to use PDFs as well as links to websites or just information in a text and link format. You'll also want to make sure that you have an easy administrative tool. And so we talked a bit about sending things out on the fly. If I don't have a back end that's responsive, that works well on my phone, that's going to be difficult to do. And so you'll look for something that has a responsive back end that's easy to use, that won't trip you up when you need to make those changes on the fly. Push notifications, also very important. Nice to have the option of scheduled on the fly and the location-based. And then I also really like attendee-to-attendee messaging and social posting. This gives people the opportunity to network with other people who are on this fly-in, extend those relationships and those conversations past just the fly-in dates to really maximize what they and you are getting out of your time. And finally, there are some fun ways that you can generate a little bit of money on your revenue or on your fly-in, and that is one, using rotating ad spaces. So we'll see here on the example on the left, we've got a little Pearson ad at the bottom. You can do an unlimited number of those images and links on your app. It's a nice way to get some sponsor money into your fly-in. You can also use it to promote things that you're doing, which is also nice. You can also create sponsors pages and navigation items using those customizable features that we talked about before. And of course, utilize the notifications as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Megan. Lots of good information there. So this is our last slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, myself, and Dermody at cqrollcall.com. You can also reach Mike. He's available for questions, and that's mike@gulagraham.com. Just up on the screen here, we have our connectivity blog, which is for associations, non-profits, anybody really involved in GR. There's some great articles on there. And one we ran recently was the Professional's Guide to Hill Day Success, which is basically giving you lots of tips on how to run your fly-in. And then there's a download on there of a checklist that you can kind of tick off as you go along. And then, of course, finally, we'd urge you to check out our Engage Advocacy app, and the link is on there. And we'll be sending this whole presentation to everybody who registered after the webinar anyway. So thanks again for joining us, and see you next time.